Jumping straight into it with trade number 1, which was whether Trump speaks with Zorhan this past November. It was November 17th, 2025 that Trump was speaking with reporters when he hinted that him and the mayor-elect at the time might have a meeting. This caused bots and bettors who were watching live to react fast and panic buy yes on this market before anyone else, shooting the odds from around 15% all the way up to 40%. But there was a big problem with this because no official date had been announced, there was no confirmation from the mayor, and Trump himself had only said maybe. Not to mention we were already over halfway past the month of November. So I bought shares of no at an average price of 60 cents. My theory was that in the panic to react to news fast, people had overbought shares of yes without fully thinking it through. And in the next few hours of that day, I ended up being correct, with the odds of them speaking quickly dropping back down near what it was before, allowing me to sell my shares at an average of 80 cents or a profit of 33%. Moving on to trade number 2, which capitalizes on human greed. It was August 18th, 2025 when a guy who goes by LordMiles started a 40-day water fast in the desert. Now I had no idea who this guy was, but polymarket bettors were 50-50 on whether he would finish the fast. But as the days continued, the odds of him completing this challenge increased as you would expect. It got to a point where you could triple your money by betting on no, which is exactly what I did because I was convinced that he himself would insider trade the market and fail this challenge on purpose. And what do you know, shortly after, LordMiles starts having a rough time in the desert and eventually fails. Now there's no way I can prove he failed on purpose, but on polymarket you can see the top holders under every market, and there are quite a few suspicious accounts who bought no. Some of these were fresh accounts at the time, which to this day have only made that one trade, so you can decide for yourself what that probably means. The next trade was my biggest in terms of sizing in all of 2025. Even though the percentage gain was very small, it profited me over 3,000. So I had been monitoring the New York mayor election but never had a clear opportunity to enter until the end of October when both Trump, Elon Musk, and there were a few other big names I'm forgetting, but these people all ended up voicing their support for Andrew Cuomo. This actually really confused me because at that time, voting day was less than a week away and Mondami was so far ahead in the polls that the guy probably could have shot someone and still ended up winning. However, markets still reacted to this and he dropped from about 96% to about 86%. And that's when I started buying like crazy because I felt that markets simply overreacted. I mean, sure, these were big endorsements, but you're talking about New York City where right-wing figures' endorsements really doesn't mean much. Moving on to the next trade where I actually bet on a past outcome. Third day of this year, Maduro was captured and being brought back to the US. This in turn ended up causing this market to explode in odds because people thought we were going to invade outright and some believe we already had invaded. However, a big mistake people made is not reading the rules correctly, because if you just look at the title, will the US invade Venezuela? You would think yes, of course, we already invaded, but when you come down to the main rules, you see this one line, invade with the intention to occupy land, and it made absolutely zero sense for us to do that. Not only would that have been wildly unpopular, but the reward just wasn't there to justify it. So this market mostly just came down to interpretation, and what's crazy is it was widely reported on and disputed, but the rules were clear. So when I entered my position at 66 cents on no, I was confident enough to risk a decent bit. The hardest part about this trade was the timing. I was up all night monitoring this market, and as you can see, I entered my position at 1:55 a.m. Okay, this next trade I've mentioned in all my videos, so we're gonna be quick, so make sure to follow along. It was on this market right here. All you need to understand is that MicroStrategy is a company that buys and holds Bitcoins. There's weekly markets for it on Polymarket, but they are notorious for being insider filled. Because of this, there's usually very little liquidity and one side's almost always at like 80+%. However, on this date, it was closer to 50-50. I got in at 42% buying yes, and the reason I bought yes was because when you scrolled down and looked at the top holders, most of them were insider accounts, whereas the top holders for the no side had just 2 people with over 1 million shares to their name, and they were the reason there was so much liquidity to begin with. So you're probably wondering, why in the world are these guys betting against insiders so hard? Well, when you look at their profiles, you can see that their most profitable trade ever was actually a different MicroStrategy bet just 2 weeks prior, and on that one they actually ended up outdoing the insiders. However, I noticed that this time was quite different. The insiders that were wrong last time sold all their shares before market closed when they realized they were in inevitably gonna be wrong. It didn't matter if it was a 60%, 80%, or even 90% loss. The main thing you need to understand is they didn't hold and wait for market to end. This time was the exact opposite. The market was ending in just a few hours and all of them were basically spam buying guests, and in that situation it seems stupid to not bet with the insiders, and this ended up coming true the following day. I do gotta give props to this guy though, because despite being down 90,000 after that whole ordeal, he didn't give up and is now back in 15,000 profit. So trades 6 and 7 are both regarding Iran. First I predicted we wouldn't strike by January 31st, and then I predicted that we would strike by March 31st. Now these trades deserve a video of their own because of how much went into them, and this video is getting really long already, but since I made the thumbnail for this video beforehand and I'm too lazy to change it, I figured I'd just mention it real quick. But if you'd like to see that or a compilation of my worst trades this past year, make sure to like and comment if you have any questions. Take care.